My family stole $120K from my inheritance to buy my sister a house. But when I sued them and won, I left them in financial ruin, and they'll never see me again. I'm 17 years old, I'm in my senior year of high school, and I basically just finished destroying my parents' financial life. But the truth is, I don't regret it at all because they literally stole $120,000 from me. Yes, you read that right. $120,000 that my grandparents, rest in peace, left specifically for my college education in their will, and my parents decided it was a better idea to use it to buy my older sister a house. I guess I should start from the beginning, so this makes sense, because the story is long, and there are still days when I can't believe all of this actually happened. My maternal grandparents died when I was like 14 years old. First my grandfather and then my grandmother like 6 months later. And honestly, it was devastating because we were super close. Like, they practically raised me half the time because my parents were always working or paying attention to Amanda, my sister, who's 8 years older than me. Amanda was always the favorite, you know, the golden child who never did anything wrong. And when she was like 19 and I was 11, my parents basically started treating me like I was invisible or something. Everything was Amanda this, Amanda that. Amanda needs money for college. Amanda needs a new car. Amanda, Amanda, Amanda. I got used to it, I guess. Or at least I learned not to expect much from them. But my grandparents always made me feel special. They took me to museums and the movies and helped me with homework. And when they died, it was like losing the only two people who really saw me as more than the problematic younger daughter. Turns out my grandparents knew exactly how my parents were, because they left in their will that $120,000 should be put in a fund specifically for my college education, with super clear instructions that the money could only be used for tuition, books, student housing, things directly related to college. I knew. This money existed because my grandmother had mentioned it to me before she died. She told me, "Olivia, don't worry about college. We made sure you have what you need." And I remember thanking her without really understanding the magnitude of what she was telling me, because $120,000 is an absurd amount of money for a 4-year-old girl. Fast forward to like 9 months ago. I was 17 and starting to apply to colleges, filling out financial aid applications and all that stressful stuff. And one day, I was at dinner with my parents and I mentioned something about needing information about the college fund for one of the applications. My mom and dad looked at each other with that weird face they make when they know they did something wrong. And my dad said something like, "Oh yeah, about that. We need to talk to you." I just sat there waiting, and they basically told me, super casual, like it was the most normal thing in the world, that they had used that money to help Amanda buy her house like 2 years ago. I swear I thought I was hallucinating or something. Like, are you telling me you spent my money? The money my grandparents left specifically for me? On buying my sister a house? And they just nodded like it was nothing. And my mom said, well, Amanda needed stability. She and Michael wanted to settle down and buy a house. And we wanted to help her, because it's very difficult for young people nowadays to buy property. I was literally in shock. I couldn't even process what I was hearing. And I told them, but that money was for my college. Grandma and Grandpa left it specifically for me. It's in the will. My dad shrugged and said, well, you can take out student loans like everyone else does. Amanda needed the money now. And besides, you're smart. You'll probably get scholarships or something. I got up from the table and went to my room without saying anything else because I knew if I opened my mouth, I was going to start screaming or crying or both. And I spent the whole night researching on Google if what they had done was legal, because something inside me knew this couldn't be right. I found a ton of information about wills and trust funds and misappropriation of funds, and basically everything I read confirmed that my parents had committed a crime, like they literally stole my inheritance because the will was super clear that the money was only for me and only for education. The next day, I went down to breakfast and told them very calmly, "I'm going to sue you for stealing my college fund. I'm going to recover every penny you owe me." And you know what they did? They laughed, literally laughed in my face. And my dad said something like, "Good luck with that. You don't have money to hire a lawyer. And by the time you turn 18, it'll be too late to do anything about it." My mom added, "Stop the drama, Olivia. You've always been so selfish. Your sister needed that help and you should be happy for her." Selfish? She called me selfish for being angry that they stole $120,000 that legally belonged to me. Can you believe it? I packed a backpack with clothes and my important stuff, called my best friend Sarah and asked her if I could stay at her house for a few days, and I left right then. Sarah's parents are amazing, like really good human beings, and when I explained the situation to them, well, an abbreviated version, they told me I could stay as long as I needed. My parents didn't even call or text me to see if I was okay. Nothing. And that hurt more than I want to admit because it confirmed that they really didn't care. I spent like a week thinking about what to do, researching more about laws and legal options, and then I remembered Uncle Richard. Well, technically he's my dad's cousin, but I always call him Uncle. He and my dad don't talk much because they had some kind of family fight years ago, but I had him on Facebook and I knew he was a corporate lawyer or something. I sent him a super tedious, long message explaining the whole situation, hoping that maybe he would ignore me or tell me he couldn't help me, but literally, the next day, he called me. Uncle Richard was furious. Like I could hear him breathing heavy on the phone while I told him all the details. And he told me, Olivia, what your parents did is not only immoral, it's completely illegal. They violated the explicit terms of your grandparents' will and basically committed fraud. He explained that although he didn't practice that type of law, he had contacts who did, and that the first thing we needed to do was contact the executor of my grandparents' will to confirm all the details. He asked me if I was sure I wanted to do this, because it was going to make the family situation very ugly, and I told him yes, that I was completely sure, because my parents had already shown that they didn't care about me at all. And the next few weeks were like a whirlwind of calls and emails and meetings. Uncle Richard contacted the will executor, who turned out to be an old lawyer who had been friends with my grandparents, and when he found out what my parents had done, he got just as furious as Uncle Richard. He confirmed that indeed the will specified that the money was only for me and only for education, and that my parents as my legal guardians had had administrative access to the fund but with very clear restrictions on how it could be used. By using it for something else, especially to benefit another child, they had completely violated the terms of the will and technically had stolen my inheritance. Uncle Richard connected me with a lawyer, specialized in family and estate cases. Her name was Patricia, and she was like 50 years old. Super professional but also super empathetic, and she explained exactly what was going to happen. Basically, we were going to send a formal letter to my parents, demanding that they return the full amount plus interest, and if they refused, we were going to proceed with a formal lawsuit. She asked me if I understood that this probably meant my relationship with my parents would be over, at least for a good while, and I told her that honestly that relationship was already pretty dead anyway. The letter was sent on a Wednesday. I remember the day because it was Sarah's birthday, and by Friday my phone exploded with messages from my parents. First, it was my mom with texts like, "How dare you threaten us this way? After everything we've done for you, you're ungrateful. Your sister is devastated." Then my dad with more legal-sounding messages trying to sound intimidating, saying things like, "This is ridiculous. You have no case. You're going to lose and end up with nothing." And then Amanda started sending me messages too, crying about how I was trying to take away her house. How could I be so cruel? That Michael and she had worked hard for that house, except no. My parents literally paid like 70% with my stolen money. I didn't respond to any of them. Patricia had told me not to communicate directly with them about the case, and honestly, I had nothing to say to them. Uncle Richard, meanwhile, was being amazing, not just with the legal aspect, but he also helped me find a small apartment I could afford with my part-time job at a coffee shop, and even helped me with the deposit. I got a roommate, Brianna, who's a nursing student and super chill, and I basically moved completely from Sarah's house to my own place, like 3 weeks after sending the legal letter. My parents obviously didn't return the money voluntarily, so the case moved to mediation, which is like this process before going to court where the two parties sit down with a neutral mediator and try to reach an agreement. The first session was super tense. I arrived with Patricia and Uncle Richard, who insisted on being there for moral support, and my parents arrived with their own lawyer, a guy who looked about as unconvinced of their case as they should have been. The mediator explained the ground rules to us, and then my dad basically tried to argue that they had the right to use the money however they wanted because they were my legal guardians, and the money was technically under their control. Patricia literally pulled out copies of the will and started reading the relevant parts out loud, pointing out each specific clause my parents had violated, and my parents' lawyer looked more and more uncomfortable. Then my mom tried to go the emotional angle, saying that they only wanted to help Amanda have a stable future, that they didn't think I would react so exaggeratedly, that family should support each other. I stayed quiet during most of the session because Patricia had told me to let her talk. But at the end, the mediator asked me directly what it was that I wanted from the case. I told him very clearly, I want every penny of the $120,000 back, plus the interest it would have earned in these last 2 years, and I want them to apologize formally. Although I know that's probably not going to happen. The mediator took notes and said he would reconnect with us in a few weeks for another session. That first mediation was in January, and during the following months we had like 4 more sessions. My parents basically went through all the stages of grief or something. First denial, saying they didn't do anything wrong, then anger, blaming me for being vindictive, then they tried to negotiate, offering me like $30,000, as if that was acceptable, and finally desperation, when Patricia made it very clear that if this went to court, they were not only going to lose the case, but they would probably have to pay legal costs too, which were going to be like another $20,000 minimum. At some point during all of this, Amanda sent me a message. It was after the 3rd mediation, I think, and it was different from the previous messages. Basically, she told me that she hadn't known that the money for the house came from my college fund, that my parents had told her it was money they had saved to help her, and that if she had known the truth, she would never have accepted the money. She said she understood why I was angry, and that she was very sorry, and that if there was anything she could do to fix the situation, to let her know. Honestly, I don't know if I completely believed her, because part of me thinks she should have suspected something weird. When suddenly my parents showed up with like $80,000 to help her buy a house. But another part of me wants to believe that she really didn't know because Amanda has never been a bad person, just super spoiled and a bit blind to how our parents treated me differently from her. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process everything. The case kept moving forward meanwhile. Patricia started preparing formal paperwork to go to court because it was clear that my parents weren't going to give in easily. But then something changed. At the last mediation session, which was in May, I think, my parents arrived completely defeated. Like my mom had been crying and my dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. Their lawyer basically admitted that they had no viable legal defense and that going to court was only going to worsen their financial situation, and proposed that my parents return the full amount of $120,000 plus like $12,000 in interest for a total of $132,000. I looked at Patricia, and she nodded like saying it was a good deal, and I said I accepted with the condition that the money be transferred to a new account completely separate that only I had access to, without my parents as administrators or anything. Everyone agreed. The papers were signed, and basically that's where the legal case ended. My parents had 6 weeks to get the money, which meant they were probably going to have to take out a loan or sell something because I seriously doubt they had that amount saved. The money arrived in my new account exactly 5 weeks later, one day before the deadline, and when I saw that number in my bank balance, I literally started crying, sitting there in my apartment. They weren't tears of happiness exactly, more like relief mixed with sadness because recovering that money meant that this whole nightmare had been real, that my parents had really robbed me, and that I had had to fight them legally to recover what was legitimately mine. Like 2 weeks later, I received my acceptance letter from my first choice university, a super good school on the East Coast that has an amazing marine biology program, which is what I want to study. And not only did they accept me, but they offered me a full merit scholarship. I mean, after all this drama and fight over the money, turns out I'm not even going to need to use most of it because the scholarship covers full tuition and housing, so the $132,000 can stay saved for grad school or emergencies or whatever. Uncle Richard took me to dinner to celebrate the acceptance and told me he was proud of me, not just for defending my rights, but for staying focused on my studies and my future during this whole process. He confessed to me that he and my dad didn't talk because my dad had asked him for borrowed money years ago and never paid him back, and that it didn't surprise him at all that they had done the same to me, because according to him, my parents had always been irresponsible with money and had favored Amanda in ways that weren't fair. Amanda and I finally talked, like a month after everything was resolved. We met at a neutral coffee shop, and it was super awkward at first, but eventually, we were able to have an honest conversation. She told me that she and Michael are trying to refinance the house to pay my parents back for what they had to return, although technically it's not her legal responsibility to do so. I told her I appreciated the gesture, but what I really needed was for her to acknowledge that our parents had favored her our whole lives, and that although she hadn't specifically known about the stolen money, she had been complicit in ignoring how they treated me differently. Amanda started crying and admitted that yes, she had seen the favoritism, but it was easier not to say anything because she benefited from it, and that she was so sorry. I don't know if we'll ever have a close relationship again as sisters, but at least now there's honesty between us, and that's something, I guess. As for my parents, I haven't talked to them since the last mediation session. They tried to send me messages a couple of times, but I just ignored them. Uncle Richard told me they're struggling financially because of the loan they had to take out to return my money. And honestly, I don't feel even a bit of pity because they created this situation completely on their own. I decided to go no contact with them at least until I graduate from college. And, depending on whether they ever truly apologize and acknowledge the damage they did, maybe I'll consider letting them back into my life. But that's a big maybe. I start college in August. I already have everything planned. I got a summer job at a local aquarium to gain experience in my field, and Brianna and I get along so well that we decided to get an apartment together near campus. Life isn't perfect. I'm still processing all this family trauma, and I'm probably going to need therapy at some point. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I have control over my future, and that no one is going to take away what legitimately belongs to me. My grandparents left that money to make sure I had the opportunities they didn't have, and although the road to protecting it was horrible, in the end, I fulfilled their wish, and now I'm going to be able to do something big with my life, thanks to them. Sometimes I wonder what they would think of all this drama. They'd probably be disappointed in my parents, but proud that I fought for myself. And that's what matters to me at the end of the day.